In the last video, we talked about J. Cole's journey of dropping single after single to convince Roc Nation and Jay-Z to let him drop his first debut album, The Sideline Story. And we even talked a little bit about the reaction to the album. But in this video, we're going to slow down a little bit, rewind, and go a little more into detail about the Sideline Story and everything that took place leading up to it. Following Friday Night Lights, J. Cole was listed as the 5th hottest upcoming rapper behind Nicki Minaj, Drake, Lupe Fiasco, and Lil Wayne. So I'm sure you can imagine how exciting it was to be a fan of rap and seeing this tweet. All singles done, albums ridiculous, title perfect, music incredible, thank you for your patience, let's change the game. After this, J. Cole would announce that the name of the album would be Cole World, The Sideline Story, and would even go on to explain that the reason for this was that he felt as though he was this whole time trying to make the basketball team, and that is exactly what he did when he got signed to Roc Nation. But now that he was on the team, he was stuck on the bench watching Jay-Z play, and he wanted to get some minutes of his own. And that's exactly what this album was supposed to do.
So this is that. That's the parallel to my rap career, which is like, yeah, I'm in the game, I'm signed, I got a fan base, I got fans, but like, whereas, you know, I want to put out an album, I want to play ball, you know what I'm saying, I want to get in the game. So that's, you know, that's the parallel of the Sideline Story.
The single that made the whole album possible was called Workout, and J. Cole came up with the idea for the song after listening to a Kanye album and what he would describe as the worst song on the album. But either way, this is the transformation. J. Cole and Roc Nation obviously believed in the single, but right away it didn't perform exactly how they expected, but it would heat up very quickly and be on the Billboard Top 100 for the next 4 months. With that being said, he would throw in a few other singles to sweeten the deal before the album, including Can't Get Enough, Mr. Nice Watch, and Nobody's Perfect. Going even beyond that, J. Cole would announce that on the weeks that he didn't drop singles for the project, he would drop songs that didn't make the project and weren't planned to be released in the first place. Now, they wouldn't be on streaming services, but fans did really get excited about this, and for a little while, it definitely brought attention towards his album. But for the most part, these songs have been forgotten because they're not as polished as regular songs, and they weren't fully completed for all of them. With that being said, this was one of the first cases of J. Cole being uncomfortable leaving songs in the vault, as he hinted at on his more recent unreleased song, Procrastination Broke.
Don't even know if somebody gonna hear this. Got so many songs they get lost in the endless folders of the hard drive. I wish I was more fearless.
In rap, we've seen a few different people try this strategy, and in general, it seems to be low risk and high reward, because if the songs don't perform well, you can say that they weren't really your best and that's why they didn't make the album. But if they do perform well, they'll drive a lot more attention towards the album, and you can say that they weren't even your primary picks. So I really wish people would do this more, and hopefully J. Cole does this in the future, but this was a one-off case. Another thing Cole would do to try to get a little more attention towards his album is host listening parties for industry and radio executives. Most of them were really complimentary, but there was one from XXL who, aside from his praise, pointed out a few concerns that Cole would later kind of address. First, he mentioned that J. Cole had done a lot of features and had a lot of features on his music before the album that really had his fan base having high expectations for him that would just be difficult to live up to. When you're working with guys like Jay-Z, Drake, Kanye, anybody like that consistently, it's going to be hard to drop an album that outshines that. This guy also mentioned that with J. Cole, he had a do-it-yourself approach that, while being admirable, would end up slowing Cole down because he was focused on producing all of his songs and developing as an artist on his own, where if he worked with other people, it would help progress the whole thing quicker. He also mentioned that Cole wasn't really known to be the best with his hooks in the first place, and bringing someone on to help him out with that wouldn't hurt, which Roc Nation also seemed to agree with based on the singles that I talked about in my last video. One interviewer was indirectly asking about these criticisms with J. Cole, and this is what he had to say.
You want to have an album that has very little guest appearances, but you also want to produce a lot of the album. Do you feel that way, or is that just... Of course,
I can't run from that anymore. Of course I want to do that. I've been producing my own music my whole life, you know what I'm saying? Like, that's one of the criticisms that really, like, it really irritates me. Like, how could you knock a man for wanting to take control of his own destiny and having the balls to do that, you know what I'm saying? So, of course that's what I want. I've been producing my first song I ever recorded was on my own beat.
By the end of all these listening parties, a few smaller details about the project would end up leaking, with one of the bigger ones being that J. Cole had worked on this album for over 3 years and had multiple songs on it from before he had even signed to Roc Nation. This means that he had held onto these songs past all of his mixtapes, including Friday Night Lights, which was well over 20 tracks long. And the reason for this, according to J. Cole, was because they were too good to release on mixtapes. On the 27th of September 2011, Cole World The Sideline Story would finally drop. J. Cole had produced almost every track on the album by himself, and also would have features from Drake, Missy Elliott, Trey Songz, and his label owner, Jay-Z. It's really hard to overstate the importance of this album for J. Cole because he just won Mixtape of the Year over Kendrick Lamar and multiple other talented people. He was being constantly compared to Drake, Nicki Minaj, and Lil Wayne as some of the hottest rappers in the game, while also being compared to Nas and Jay-Z, who were some of the best rappers in the game. J. Cole had a lot of hype to live up to, and there were some fans saying that he should have never had all this credit to begin with because he was only dropping free music and obviously people wouldn't pay for an album from him, while others were saying this was just the beginning of J. Cole's reign in the industry. Fortunately for Cole, the album would end up answering any questions people had about his talent. The album would go #1, selling 218,000 copies, with some of the biggest songs being Workout, Nobody's Perfect, and Can't Get Enough. One thing that was huge for J. Cole was that he chose topics for this album that everybody could relate to. He went over grinding to try to work your way up to being something, finally seeing your chance to do it, making it, and then kind of seeing some of the downsides to that lifestyle, while also talking about relationships and some tough decisions that people have to make. This was the album that would solidify J. Cole as a superstar in rap. He wasn't gonna be an opener after this album. He wasn't one of the hottest in the game, he was one of the best in the game. Not only did J. Cole make the team, not only did he finally get the minutes he wanted, but now he was one of the faces of the league. The only problem is, the game works completely different when you're on top.